Everyone is here. So I wanted to take a moment to review the basic functions of the Zoom platform on the bottom of your screen. To ensure sound quality, all attendees, your lines will be muted throughout this presentation. If you're having trouble hearing or seeing the slides, just click the chat button and type in your problem to the host so that we can help you troubleshoot. And hopefully no one will have any challenges this evening. We also have saved time at the end of this presentation to answer questions about today's topics, which is energy. This is the Memphis Energy Virtual Town Hall meeting. And what we're hoping to do is share some basic information with you so you can have a greater understanding of the concerns and issues surrounding this piece. At some point in the near or relatively near future, our decision makers will be making some choices about your energy future that will directly affect you, your children, and your children's children. And also, if you want to ask a question, you will just click on the Q&A button along the bottom of your screen, and we will work to get to as many questions as we possibly can at the end. And lastly, we're recording this webinar, and we'll send you the recording along with key action steps that we'll address after the webinar is finished. And so at this time, I would like to tell you a little bit about Memphis Has the Power. Memphis Has the Power is a campaign that I'm working with, and it's a part of SACE that works to ensure Memphians have affordable, equitable, and clean energy. We are working to achieve energy justice and create a cleaner, more prosperous Memphis. The campaign has worked in Memphis for several years, backstopped by the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and a lot of you know that as SACE. Our work has lifted up Memphians who struggle with unaffordable energy bills and has helped result in large increases in funding to help Memphians with lower incomes reduce their energy bills through the 2017 redesign of MLGW's home weatherization Share the Pennies program into an opt-out format. SACE is an appointed member of MLGW's Power Supply Advisory Team, the community advisory team helping shape MLGW's integrated resource plan. And now I'm going to introduce our panelists for this evening, starting with Dr. Steve Smith. Dr. Smith is the Executive Director of SACE. Once again, that's the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, based out of Knoxville, where he is also located. And under his leadership, SACE has grown to be a premier voice for clean energy issues in the Southeast region. Next, we have Memphis City Councilman, Dr. Jeff Warren, and he was elected to the council last year in 2019. He's a family medical physician and also a clinical associate professor at the University of Tennessee Health Sciences. And lastly, we have attorney Herman Morris Jr. He's the founder and principal attorney at the Morris Law Firm, formerly the president and CEO of Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. And he is also affiliated with Friends of the Earth. And as for yours truly, I got into the energy justice movement a few years ago through a friend of mine by the name of Sandra Upchurch, who was the environmental justice chair for the local chapter of the Memphis NAACP. And once she introduced me to this work, I found it to be very interesting and fascinating, and the fact that it touches everyone. Energy touches all of us. We don't think about what's behind it when we flip a switch or we get a glass of water from the faucet, but that was one of the things that I liked about the energy movement was that it touched everyone's lives. And from there, I participated in the SACE Energy Conference here in Memphis in 17. I've traveled to other energy conferences to Atlanta, and I was at the climate change protest in Washington, D.C. back in November. So at this time, I want to just share some basics with you concerning energy. So what is a utility? A utility is an organization that provides a service to a certain city or community. Some utilities only provide one service, but in the case of our utility, Memphis's utility, that's Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, you all know it as MLGW, it provides electric, gas, and water to customers in its service territory. And what is MLGW? Memphians are served by MLGW to get that electricity for its customers. MLGW buys it wholesale from TVA, which is Tennessee Valley Authority. And what is Tennessee Valley Authority and TVA? Excuse me, what is Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, and Midwest Independent Transmission System Operator, MISO? Okay, the Tennessee Valley Authority is a regional power provider that sells power to 150 local companies, including MLGW, who then in turn sells the power to us, their customers. MISO, Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, is an independent, not-for-profit organization that delivers electric power across 15 U.S. states and the Canadian province of Manitoba. MISO also operates right across the border from MLGW in Arkansas and Mississippi and could help provide alternative power supplies to MLGW. And finally, what is an energy burden? An energy burden is a household's energy cost. That's the amount you pay to your utility divided by the household income. The national average is around 3%. The Memphis metro area has the highest energy burden of any metro area in the nation. It's 6.2 on average, with many low-income households here experiencing rates as high as 25%, which brings us to the issue at hand. Memphians are charged too much for power and are impacted by fossil fuel pollution. For too long, TVA has neglected to meet Memphians' needs for affordable, equitable, and clean energy, and is now trying to lock Memphis into decades more of the status quo. That's polluting our air, spending millions of dollars on corporate jets, while our low-income neighbors get their power shut off, and blocking investment in clean, affordable solar energy that would make our communities healthier and more resilient. Solutions. Memphis is at a historic turning point, as I mentioned earlier. It is history because the decisions that are coming up, they will affect us, our children, and our children's children. This could chart a new course to energy justice and affordable, equitable, and clean energy. Reducing energy waste through energy efficiency and harnessing low-cost renewable power would lower bills for customers and help reduce the pollution that harms our community. Memphis leaders must work to give MLGW the autonomy needed to bring the benefits of energy efficiency and low-cost clean energy, even if it means leaving TVA. Now, what is going on with MLGW and TVA? And by the way, when I finish these slides, our panelists, they will be making comments as they choose on what I'm now sharing. So what's going on with MLGW and TVA? MLGW has gotten its power from TVA for the last 80 years. That's quite some time. TVA is pressuring MLGW to sign a self-renewing 20-year contract instead of the current 5-year contract. MLGW has just completed a long-term study called an Integrated Resource Plan. Some of you know that as an IRP, and is in the process of re-examining where it will get its power from. So now we're moving on to the timeline. Now, June 4th, that was just last week, that was the start of a 30-day public comment period allowing for input from the community. So make sure you take advantage and participate in that. More information about that later. July through August, the final draft long-term resource plan expected to be released and presented to the MLGW board. And to be determined, decisions will be made about the two following items: whether or not to issue the request for proposals, RFP, and whether or not to leave TVA in favor of a cheaper power. Final decisions will require approval by the MLGW board and the Memphis City Council. Draft report highlights: draft long-term resource plan, or IRP, released June 29th, 2020, showed MLGW could save $120 to $150 million per year by leaving TVA and generating some of its own power. The lowest cost energy portfolio report identified was also the one with the most renewable energy. That was up to 75% renewable energy. Also, the IRP recommended MLGW issues a request for proposals, that's RFP, to get real ideas for alternative power supply options. And if MLGW should leave TVA, MLGW could save hundreds of millions of dollars per year. It would be more flexible to meet Memphis's needs. Resources for investments in energy efficiency programs that can help lower utility bills and lift Memphians out of poverty. New, good-paying, clean energy jobs could be provided. There could be more generation of clean, renewable energy like solar that decreases pollution and harms our health. So what's at stake if MLGW stays with TVA? We'll continue paying high utility bills and having the highest energy burden of any metro area in the country. Also, no freedom to buy power from cheaper, cleaner sources. There would be a lack of significant investment in meaningful energy efficiency programs, failing to fully help hardworking Memphis families and their businesses. Same provider we've had for decades, no change. So what does this all boil down to? This boils down to, there have been several studies thus far showing Memphians could save hundreds of millions of dollars per year if MLGW purchased its power from a new supply. The only way to know for sure what the savings would be is to get actual proposals from alternate power suppliers, also known as a RFP. So now at this time, we're going to ask our panelists to turn on their videos. And I'm going to allow you time to comment, but I'm going to recognize you first. Okay, there you are. Three very handsome and distinguished gentlemen. So that was quite a bit of information that I shared there, and I just want to thank the team at this time before I forget. They did a great job putting this together. And so I think I'll start with you, Herman, of what I shared, just whatever you want to comment on, and whatever you'd like to respond, however you like to respond based on what I just shared. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pearl. I would like to say a couple of things at the outset. One, I am affiliated with and consulting with Friends of the Earth, who came to Memphis about 3 years ago on an issue that's critical in this community, and that's the energy burden. You mentioned it earlier in your opening remarks, Pearl. And the energy burden is what you have to pay as a percentage of your household income for your utility services, for your energy services. And we found, that's Friends of the Earth, found that Memphis was ground zero, was the area that had the most extreme energy burdens. And why wouldn't it? We've got a very high poverty population that are going from hand to mouth in many cases, from month to month, on a survival, a subsistence budget. And any movement in a utility bill or utility cost has a dramatic impact, and it increases the energy burden on those individuals. And we should do something about that. As it relates to the other issues you raised regarding TVA, I've been in this fight for a while. Back in the early 2000s, we did a study, even back then. And the study said that if Memphis were to go somewhere else and get their wholesale power, if Memphis were to leave TVA, that we would save, and this is in 1999, $2,000, we would save $100 million a year. That is $100 million this year, next year, the year after that. And if we had done it then, we would have saved quite a bit of money, probably $2 billion by now. The same question, the same issue is before us today. And we're looking at it again, and we're studying it hard and applying what we've learned over the ensuing years. And I think we're on the brink of making a right decision. And we'll talk more about what I think that right decision is. But spoiler alert, the right decision is to get cheaper power from another source that's available to the city of Memphis and have an impact on those who are the least of these in our community.
Okay, thank you for that. And next we'll move on to Steve.
Great. Well, thank you, Pearl, and thanks for the other panelists and everybody that's joined. Again, my name is Stephen Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. Basically, I just want to reinforce a few points that Pearl made and added a little bit to it. You know, Memphis has the power to control its energy future. The decision that is on the table, the decision that is being debated right now, and as Herman queued it up, is really critical across the board for so many citizens in Memphis. Struggling with the energy burdens, Memphis has the power to actually take some of these savings and really be able to do a significant investment in energy efficiency and really help lift some of these people that are struggling out of poverty. Memphis has the power to completely reshape its energy future and separate itself from the decades of decision making that TVA has had, where TVA has built a number of coal-fired power plants, They've got some very old nuclear power plants. They've got legacy issues around coal ash that they have to clean up. And all those costs are going to continue to be really just an anchor or a chain around TVA's neck. And by breaking away from TVA, Memphis has the opportunity to completely clean the slate and rewrite its energy future going forward. And that energy future is going to be able to take advantage of a number of the new technologies like renewable energy, like the ability to be able to save money from these new technologies and then invest them in the community in strategic ways. And that is, that's really truly unique because there's a lot of these legacy issues that are weighing down other utilities. Memphis has the power to have the ability to recruit industry in. Many industries now are looking for, have sustainability goals and looking for clean technologies. Memphis has the ability to build on the great geography that it has with all the transportation infrastructure to really become a leading green city. And the integrated resource plan, the study that Pearl referenced, pointed out the opportunity to bring a lot of good paying jobs into Memphis to build out this clean energy infrastructure and to be able to then connect to MISO and be able to import cleaner technologies. This is all within our power. The other thing that we need to be aware of is that there are other local power companies like MLGW in the TVA system that are contemplating leaving the TVA system. And as other local power companies leave TVA, those that stay with TVA are going to be forced to pay a higher portion of the overall cost that TVA is burdened with. And so Herman, to his credit, when he was at MLGW, was part of a tough negotiation that freed Memphis from having to carry what are called stranded costs, these legacy issues. Memphis has a clean break opportunity here, and TVA is trying to lock Memphis into a long-term 20-year contract. But I think by going out for requests for proposals, getting some solid bids, and then making a clean break and being able to control the future, Memphis has the power to do this, and we're really proud to be a part of advocating for that. And we look forward to further questions this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And now we'll turn it over to Councilman Warren.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. I'm looking at some of our questions, and I think that I'd like to talk about those to start off with. One was from a friend of mine, Bert Wolf, who wanted to know how much money we would have to invest to make this happen. But one of the things we don't have from this IRP from TVA and MLGW is, do we really have to invest any money at all to have the amount of power generation, clean power generation that we need here in Memphis? There are a number, the thing about MISO, it's a whole bunch of people that produce energy. And we have not asked them the direct question, can you actually, in 5 years, produce the energy we need? And if so, you have to ask an organization called ACES, which contracts with people in MISO, to tell us if they can supply the energy and what it will cost. So that's not part of what we've gotten yet. Our council has sent a letter to the mayor requesting the mayor do this because we haven't got this from MLGW. In my mind, you know, if we don't have to build things and we don't have to own a power company, then MLGW doesn't have to be a power producer. They can continue to do like they've always done, supply us with energy that they get from sources that are much cheaper than the TVA. And we can save not 150 million, but 300 to 450 million a year. And we have banks that will loan us money that we can use now once we leave TVA and establish that we're going to be able to get rates that are guaranteed from other places that give us 300 to 450 million dollars a year savings. We get to keep some of that money as a city. That's part of our deal with MLGW. Once they make a certain amount of profit, then they have a certain amount that they can give back to the city that we can use, and we can use those in all sorts of programs that we need right now to help our people who are, you know, struggling with a 25% energy bill. Imagine if 25% of every bit of money you made had to go to your energy, and the other 50% or more had to go to your rent. What do you eat? What do you do? So, I mean, right now, I think we need to find out, do we really have to spend money? I can guarantee you, I bet there are a number of companies would like to come in here, set up solar, set up other things that are good renewable energy, and be able to supply us with power. So in my mind, we've got half the question answered. We still need to get the rest of that answer to be able to figure out where the right thing is, the right thing to do. And we're hoping that if MLGW doesn't ask that question, which they did not ask in their IRP process, they need to ask MISO if they have the number of people in their organization, the number of people that are members, are there members there who think they can supply Memphis? And if they can't, then we have to see if we have to produce our own energy. We don't know that answer yet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So my first question was, what is the cost of investment to save hundreds of millions of dollars? And Councilman Warren, you've already touched on that some in your comments just now. So I would like to give Dr. Smith and Attorney Morris an opportunity to comment on this if they like to. What is the cost of investment to save hundreds of millions of dollars? And we'll start with you first, Dr. Smith.
Well, this is part of the work in progress. This is part of what came out of the integrated resource plan. And those numbers are really tied to a number of different issues. As what Council Member Warren pointed out, depending on whether MLGW does some of its own self-generation or whether it contracts completely with MISO and we get some solid numbers there, you know, that will have part of the impact is what is the generation a piece of this. The other part of it is going to be TVA has a very robust transmission system, meaning that it moves power from Western North Carolina all the way over to Memphis and from Alabama all the way up to Kentucky. And it uses a very robust transmission system to do that. With MLG&W now looking west instead of east, there would have to be some transmission infrastructure built to interconnect with MISO. And this is an open question, to be honest, because TVA could be a partner in that and could allow us to use some of their infrastructure and save Memphians a lot of money. Or TVA could play hardball and basically say that they're not going to do that. And if the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission does not interject itself into that process and force TVA, then there'll have to be some lines built to do the interconnection so that the power can move into Memphis in a reliable way. And those numbers are, you know, $500 to $700 million. But the good news is that those are expenses that can be spread out over decades. They're not going to be annual costs. And so when you're talking about $100, $200, $300 million every single year in savings, and then you're talking about spreading, you know, $500 to $700 million over 20 years, you can see that the cost of that infrastructure can be tens of millions of dollars as opposed to hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's where this becomes a very favorable financial decision for the citizens of Memphis, because those transmission costs, there are some ongoing costs, but a lot of that is kind of the big upfront cost to get that infrastructure built out. So there will be some, but I think it's really small in comparison to the savings that could be had.
Okay, thank you.
I think
Attorney
Steve is
Morris,
exactly
did you care to
right.
comment?
I think you're exactly right, Steve. I think that it is an investment. That means you put a little bit in and you expect and look to gain a lot in return. And that's what the formula is in this arrangement as well. Friends of the Earth retained a industry recognized consultant, the Brattle Group. They are energy engineering gurus. And they did a report. We call it the Brattle Report. And it laid out several scenarios. One scenario was MLGW building its own fleet of generation, mostly clean, green, renewable, solar, wind, etc., with some gas. And some scenarios had MLGW getting power from MISO across the river. Some had it getting power from other sources, again, clean, renewable sources from as far away as the Midwest and Western Plains. But the point is, all of those would have involved investments. At the end of the day, after the Brattle Report calculated the cost of installing those various scenarios of power, it came back with a report that said, notwithstanding that, after the investment of whatever it took to get that power here, you still enjoyed a savings of $300 to $350 million a year. That's a tremendous return on investment. And that's what this whole issue is about. It's investing so that we can enjoy a greater return. The return that we're getting from TVA is we're sending a lot of money to Knoxville. We're sending a lot of resources and hard-earned cash through our utility bills to Knoxville and Chattanooga and East Tennessee, and we're getting electricity. Wouldn't it be great to get electricity and savings? And that's what this whole review and examination of the TVA relationship and what it's offering, and the possibility, the potential of getting more and better deals from other providers. There's one other observation that I would like to make, and I think it was a question that was raised earlier on one of the chats. Well, what's TVA's position been as it looked down the barrel of saying you're going to lose your biggest customer? And Memphis is TVA's biggest customer. We're probably somewhere between 11 to 12 to 13% of the energy that's bought from TVA. Well, what's their position? Their position has initially been, we don't negotiate. You're our biggest customer. You get what our smallest customer gets, and that's it, buddy. Take it or leave it. I say we should leave it. If that's their deal, I say we should leave it. We should leave it for lower cost power. We should leave it for greener, cleaner power. We should leave it for a generation source that doesn't pollute our aquifer. There are plenty of reasons why we should leave TVA for a better deal. And a better deal is lower, cleaner, better power for this community. With regard to the transmission issues, well, it's just across the river to reach MISO, or just across the state line to reach MISO. That's a small investment to make, I think, with the potential of, again, 20 years ago, we did a report that said we would save $100 million a year. It's 20 years later, and that's quadruple the amount of savings that are available to us if we are willing to take a better deal that will be available to us.
Okay, wonderful. So since you made reference to the transmission lines, I'm going to throw this one over to Dr. Smith. So as I'm engaging with the community and providing information, one of the terms that keeps coming up is transmission, the transmission line. So can you tell our viewers what is a transmission line and why is it important?
Well, again, and I'll do this very briefly, but I sort of hit on it before. The transmission lines are the big towers that you see that are able to transmit power over very large distances. And they tend to be very high voltage, 500 kilovolts or whatever, but that's kind of irrelevant to most people. But they're very, very, very large. They transmit over a great distance. They then step it down, and there's smaller, less powerful lines. And then eventually you get to a distribution network, which is what MLGW manages primarily throughout the city and into the neighborhoods. But those transmission lines are critical because you have to get large amounts of power transmitted in to provide the energy. And again, depending on the decisions that Memphis makes, there will need to be some investment in this transmission infrastructure so that Memphis has the power to control its own destiny. So yes, transmission is an issue, but just like I said earlier, what Herman just said is that it is an investment. It is an investment that will be spread out over multiple years. So while it may sound very, very large, a big number, $500, $700 million, if you spread that over 10 years, then it's $70 million. If you spread it over 20 years, then it's $35 million. And if every year you're getting 100 or 200 or $300 million in savings, you're coming out very much in the positive for that investment. So yes, transmission is important. It is critical to good, reliable power where we keep the lights on, but it should not be seen as a roadblock. And again, when you do more investment in the community with local power like solar power and other things like that, it requires less transmission, keeps a lot of jobs in the area, it's cleaner power. And then you also have the opportunity to control your destiny more. So I think these are the kind of discussions that we're going to see come out of the request for proposals and sort of be able to start to compare this. I believe that TVA as a federal entity should not be able to not support Memphis in this enterprise, because the rules of the road for every other part of the country is all the utilities cooperate to provide backup power and backup services, so we have the most reliable system in the country. And so for TVA to be threatening to play hardball and be threatening not to negotiate, I think MLGW is going to eventually have to call their bluff. And I think that when they do that, there may even be more savings, because I think TVA has some of this infrastructure that we need, and we need to be able to negotiate for them to supply that, even if Memphis is buying from MISO. So I think we'll see that play out over time, but that's going to be all the deal making that we'll have to do. But the first thing Memphis has got to do is have the power to tell TVA they're leaving, and then it brings them TVA to the table in a new way.
I think that Steve is exactly right on that. The transmission lines are like the expressway. They move a lot of the electrons real fast to a lot of different places. And if TVA has an expressway, well, they're trying to make it a toll road, aren't they? If TVA has a toll road and says, well, we're not going to let you use ours, we'll build our own. If you're saving $350 million a year, you can afford to build your own and save ad infinitum into the future. So I think that if TVA is of a mind that we're not going to let you use our expressway to move power in, that we can do just fine by building our own and being completely independent and free of them altogether. I also think that the powers that be, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and there are other guiding bodies that work hard to keep electricity in the mainland, in the United States, balanced and flowing freely. I don't think they'll let TVA take that kind of hard stand, particularly if it's to the detriment of the national grid. I think that we all have to plug in and play nice with each other in this national grid sandbox, and TVA will come along, perhaps grudgingly, perhaps being drugged by the FERC or some other agency to play fair and play right. But at the end of the day, if they don't, we'll build our own highway and we'll bring power in, and we'll still save money for the people in Memphis.
Well, with that being said, Attorney Morris, can TVA legally withhold use of their transmission lines that were built with federal funds? Is it possible for them to do that?
Well, that's the question, and that might be one that will have to be resolved. There is some authority, I believe, and without getting into the weeds with legal issues, there is some authority that suggests that the FERC has, at least on one occasion, taken a position that if you can connect to a place like Entergy across the river in Arkansas, that you can do that, and that can ship enough power in to help sustain MLGW. But going back to the original question, would MLGW save money if it left TVA? That was the question we posed to the Brattle Group when they did the report. And they said, sure it would save money. And it could save money if it bought power from someone else and shipped it in. It could also save money if it built its own solar, wind, and other clean, green, renewable sources and used that and built it over a period of time to serve the Memphis market. So there are several ways that this cat can be skinned, to use an old country concept. And I think we need to look at all of the ways that can result in us saving money for the people of Memphis, for the ratepayers at MLGW.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to move on to Councilman Warren. Recently, you introduced a resolution that was passed 8-4, and I would like for you to tell the viewers about the resolution.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Walker. We have been working on the city council, wanting to make sure that we got accurate information and all of our options. And one of the things you have to realize is any institution has institutional inertia. MLGW has been with TVA for 80 years. The thought of having to go somewhere else internally, whether you admit it or not, has to panic people who've been working at that institution for 80 years. However, we can save money, and that means people's rates go down, and there's extra money left to use in the city if we leave TVA, and we've got to do it. There's a huge press. TVA's hired 8 different people. They don't call them lobbyists, they call them consultants or public relation firms to sort of help them, get their stuff out. And they've gone after the people who have been hired, like Herman, for Friends of the Earth and other groups to try to promote this idea. In my mind, we need to get the data. And I think when we get the data, which means literally, it took me a while to figure this out. So ACES, people ask about reliability. MISO is, I think, 2 to 3 times larger than MLGW. You don't hear about people in the Midwest or Canada or Louisiana always being without power. They don't have power outages. They have reliability, just like we do. As Herman stated, there's a national organization with the federal government that is responsible for making sure our national power grid works, which means right now, TVA buys power from MISO, and MISO buys power from TVA. It just depends upon who's making it and who's got extra and who's got less, and it goes back and forth. It's a big market. So what we need to do is buy from the market that doesn't cost us so much. On average, right across the river in Arkansas, they pay about $35 to $45 or watt hour, dollars per watt hour. Whatever Herman, you can tell me what that is later. But whatever it is, we pay 75 on average, and we pay 75 all the time. Now theirs goes up and down depending upon what the contract is, but basically they can get it as low as 20, and sometimes it's more. But the average over there is about $45 just across the river. Think of what you can do if you're a family that's spending 25% on your energy bill, and we half it or take it down by 2/3. Now you've got money to be able to eat, plan, pay your bills, buy your kids food, buy your kids, clothes. I mean, this is a huge anti-poverty issue in Memphis, where we've essentially been 12%, 13% of MLG&W's business for years and gotten very little from them. And when we talk about leaving, their comment is, we're just going to not negotiate, take it or leave it, buddy. Here's a 20-year contract with a 20-year out. This is bullying to the nth degree. And when people are bullying you, there's often a sign that they're weak on the backside. And I think that's what this is showing. This is the right move. And in my mind, we just need to get the data. So I'm hoping that the mayor will ask that question we've been asking: can MISO provide us with power without us building anything? And if so, what is it going to cost to get the transmission lines here? And what is power going to cost us in 5 years? Once we ask that question, then I think we'll be able to get money into where we can do our infrastructure. Because right now, MLGW is way behind on infrastructure. We've got to really build it up. That's why power keeps going out every time there's a storm. Believe it or not, in infrastructure, they're counting tree trimming as part of their infrastructure as opposed to part of their, general operations. So when they're asking us as a council for money for infrastructure, millions of dollars of that is going to tree trimming, which should already be in their budget for operations. But they've gotten so far behind, it's got to be their request for infrastructure. So I think we need to get out of that and get them to where they've got enough money to keep all the infrastructure locally going. So when we get power from another institution such as MISO, it will be actually able to flow and we won't have so many outages. So that's
Okay, this has been some great information, and as we're winding down, we're going to try to do a couple of more questions. And once again, as it relates to me engaging with the community, just some of the language around this people are not always familiar with. And so, Steve, I want to direct this next question to you. What is meant by clean and renewable options?
Well, so historically, a lot of power has been generated from burning something. You could be burning coal, you burn gas, you irradiate uranium, and the coal and the gas the coal is dirty from cradle to grave. I mean, you mine it, you burn it, you have coal ash that's left over, you create air pollution. Natural gas is somewhat cleaner, but it still has emissions that can affect the atmosphere and change both local air pollution. The fracking of gas is problematic, and so there's issues there. Nuclear power, you've got to mine the uranium, and then you have this long tail legacy of nuclear waste. And then if you have any problems with the nuclear plants, they could be quite catastrophic. So there are various ways that we have historically generated power that are less clean and have higher risk. Luckily, in the past decade or so, we've really perfected the ability to capture the wind in wind power, capture the solar power. Those technologies have no fuel cost. When the sun is shining, you're getting, in essence, the power. And I'm 58 years old. The one thing that I can count on every single day is the sun comes up in the east and it sets in the west, and that's always been happening, and I think it probably always will. Those technologies now are cost effective. They can actually beat the price of fossil fuels, and they don't have these legacy tail issues and risk, and so they're cleaner. The other thing is that we're now coupling them with storage, meaning that the one knock on renewable energy has been it's intermittent, meaning that you don't get solar at night when the sun's down, and you don't get wind when it's not blowing. But yet there's plenty generated in the times when they are, and if it's stored, it can be dispatched just like burning something, so it becomes equally reliable. And so now what we have is we have the opportunity of clean power, no fuel costs, that can be reliably dispatched, that is cost competitive. And so we need to make more of those investments, because those investments are actually good for the community, because they help with air pollution, they help with asthma, they help with all kinds of issues. They don't have these legacy waste issues that we're dealing with, like the contamination of the aquifer from the Allen plant and other things like that. So these are clean technologies. The beauty is the studies that have been done show that Memphis has a phenomenal solar resource that can be taken advantage of, where there's a lot of solar capacity that can be built out in the greater Memphis area and in and around the greater Memphis area. And so that's going to be a tremendous resource that we need to tap into. The other beauty is by going west into the MISO system, there's a lot of wind power that can be transmitted in that's very cost effective and very clean, has high what's called capacity factor, meaning it's very reliable. And so these technologies are now much more available. And so I think this is where we believe that Memphis is going to be able to control, has the power, Memphis has the power to control its own destiny, tap into these cleaner resources It's more healthy for the people, it's more healthy for the planet, and more large corporations are looking for these types of investments to where they locate their businesses because they have sustainability goals that they want to meet. So it's kind of a win-win situation across the board. And we believe that this IRP has shown that there is a tremendous possibility for these technologies to be tapped into. And I think we need to really dig in deep and go for that, because that's part of giving Memphis the power to control its destiny.
Okay. Well,
I noticed a question from someone saying that since you had a recommendation 20 years ago, what happened? Well, I had a great team. They did some tremendous work, and we studied it, we analyzed it, and we came up with $100 million worth of savings a year from going somewhere other than TVA. And darn it, I left before I was able to get that fully rolled out. And all we were able to do was what we did, but the concept never left. And we're here again, and it's another opportunity for us to save a lot of money for the people in Memphis by finding cheaper power that's cleaner and that's less caustic to the environment, that'll be better for us and cheaper for us. And I think that's the way we should go.
okay, well, now I have the $1 million question. So the time is up, and I wanted to know if you all could stay just a few more minutes and we take a couple of more questions. Is that possible?
Sure.
Earl,
Okay.
I've been on Zoom about 8 hours today, so I may leave this with my very capable colleagues, Dr. Smith and my neighbor and good friend Herman Morris. But thanks for asking me to come.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Warren. Thank you for your leadership on this.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Hey guys, no problem, and you guys keep it up. And I'm going to do what I can as a council member to try to make sure we can lower energy costs and make it better. You know, and you guys are leading the way. I'm just there in council trying to make sure people listen to you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So once again, this is the Memphis Energy Virtual Town Hall meeting. I'm the moderator, Pearl Walker. Our guests for this evening have been Councilman Dr. Jeff Warren, Attorney Herman Morris, and Dr. Steve Smith. So we're going to take a couple of more questions and then wrap things up for the evening. And I just want to appreciate you all for sharing these questions. These are some wonderful questions. I wish we could get around to all of them. Herman, are you still there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, I think this would be a good one for you. The gentleman writes, will Memphians be able to generate their own electricity? Are there any ordinances that are needed, that need to be passed to help people generate their own electricity? How can the average Memphian be more energy dependent?
Well, one of the things that we can do, that we can all do, is we can take advantage of the opportunity to roll out solar as an energy source. It's free, it's available. Its costs are trending down in terms of what it costs to get it set up and hooked up, and it also creates jobs, and will create jobs as these solar, let's call them engineers, are out and about installing solar infrastructure and equipment on our houses and in our community. I think that's a first way of looking at it at an individual level. What can I do as an individual if I want to help to keep our environment clean and I want to be on the cutting edge? You know, solar and where it's trending now is kind of like comparing your cell phone to your old phone that used to be hung on your wall. It's much more flexible. It's much more usable, and it's a lot cheaper when you get it all in and operating. And I think that's something that we should look at. There's also opportunities to bring other clean and green energy in from outside the community. But I believe, for one, personally, that solar as an individual, if you want to have some generation at your own facility, home, shop, or wherever you are, that's a good way to look at getting energy and lowering your cost.
Hey, Pearl,
Okay.
Pearl, can I add just a little bit to
Sure.
that?
Sure.
One of the reasons that we've lost confidence in TVA is that TVA had some good programs a number of years ago to support solar. They have abandoned those programs. We've seen, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, they've completely taken a hostile position towards people owning their own generation and owning their own solar. They've made it more difficult for that to happen. They've undermined, they've criticized, and they've interfered with people doing their own generation. This is one of the reasons why a break from TVA would be very refreshing for the Memphis market, because it would give MLGW the control to dictate the rules. Right now, because of this very onerous contract that MLGW has with TVA, TVA gets to dictate all the rules. And if they break that contract and they have the power to do it, and they get independent of TVA, they can come up with their own set of rules to support local generation and allow people to do more with their own rooftops. And I think that's one of the real advantages to looking at a clean break from TVA, because TVA has become extremely onerous and extremely hostile towards customer-owned solar.
Yeah. Pearl, there was
Okay.
another
Okay.
question. There was another question that I noticed. If MLGW decided to leave TVA, what could we do within the 5-year notice period to lower our costs? Well, two things I'd like to comment on that question.
Sure.
One is, one of the most valuable, hard-fought, hard-won assets that we have is a 5-year out with no stranded costs, no clawback, no penalty for leaving. That's amazing that we got that. And I had a very good team back in the day, the old guys, who did a good job of hammering that out. It is a way that Memphis can move to a newer, cheaper supplier and not have to pay any exit fees to TVA for doing that. And I think that that's extremely valuable. What can we do during the 5 years to lower our costs? Well, what we can do is we can do what we used to call responsible consumption. There's a whole lot of ground to be made up and gained in energy efficiency, weatherization, winterization, and all of the ways that you can reduce your consumption, but and it too, and including some habits. Don't leave a house cooling all week when you're going to be out of town. How to use power responsibly, and in doing so, reduce your power. There ought to be a multitude of efforts and programs to educate our community on how to save in what you consume, so that we don't use power like we're going to the gas station and filling up our tank with gas, but the tank has a hole in it from our inefficient use and waste. So half of what we fill it up goes into the ground because of the hole. We need to plug the holes in our homes, in our communities, so that we can consume what we need and not waste and not consume what we don't need. And that will reduce
Okay.
our costs.
I guess I'll do one more question. And back to the community engagement. This is another one that I get often. If we change the electric power supplier, will I have multiple bills? Who wants to take that one?
I would hope we'd have a bill from MLGW that says you're paying 50%, 20%, 30% less, but you still got good old hometown energy, MLGW working for you.
Yeah, and Pearl, I have had some people in the community flag for me that they don't want the city to lose control of MLGW if they leave TVA. Let's be very, very clear. MLGW is a public power entity that the city owns. We're not talking about selling MLGW and having somebody else become the provider to the customer. What we're talking about is the city retaining ownership of MLGW as a public power entity, but MLGW buying its power from somebody. So the bill will still flow through MLGW as it always has. But as Herman said, those savings should be passed through to the customer. So this isn't about privatizing MLGW. This isn't about abandoning the ability for the city to own its utility. It's about where the utility gets its power. You will still get your bill and you will still have MLGW as your provider.
And Steve, the other thing that I'm proud that my team accomplished was when that issue came up way back when, a couple of decades ago, I guess, it was put to bed, it was put to rest by a very aggressive response from the MLGW employees, staff, the city council, and this community. No sale, no deal, no way, never. So I think we're comfortable with MLGW. We just want them to have a chance to give us cheaper power by buying cheaper wholesale power.
Okay, well, I think that you all have done a great job, and we have definitely covered a lot of territory this evening, a lot of information, but I'd like to give each of you 1 minute if you have anything you want to touch on that we have not covered this evening, and then I'll wrap it up. Steve, you can go first.
Okay. Well, first of all, Pearl, thank you very much. You've done a wonderful job. And again, I appreciate all of your leadership in the community and the great things you do. Herman, it's an honor to work side by side with you. And it was great to have Council Member Warren on. I want to thank each of the panelists for participating and all the people that have stuck through this. I know it's a tricky issue and it's difficult, a lot on the table. We've still got time. I really encourage people to stay engaged. And Pearl's going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can stay engaged. The bottom line for me is, when SACE started working in the community of Memphis and trying to really work with ways to help with the energy burden, help clean up the power supply, working with other partners like the Sierra Club and other groups that are doing great work in the community. We really wanted to see a better, their head track, their lack of support for customers to do more energy efficiency, their lack of support for clean, renewable energy. So Memphis has the power. That's the name of the campaign. We believe that we need to keep saying that. We need to keep pushing that. People need to control their destiny in Memphis. And so we stand fully in support of that. And so I think we can have a cleaner, lower cost, more local control future by looking at getting these options on the table and look at breaking away from TVA to have independence. And I'm proud to be a part of the overall movement here to make this happen. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. And Attorney Morris?
Pearl, I think you've done an excellent job in bringing this to the community's awareness. Keep doing it, keep helping us stay aware and alert. It's a very important decision. I'm consulting with Friends of the Earth. Friends of the Earth is not a profit-making organization. They are a non-profit, primarily climate control organization. They're concerned about global warming, and they're very active in that space globally. They're in 97 countries, but they're also in Memphis, Tennessee. Why? They're here because of the energy burden. And part of the reason we have such a heavy energy burden is because we're paying too much for electricity from TVA. We need to stay on the case. We need to keep getting that message out. There are organizations that have been toiling in the vineyards, like Friends of the Earth, like SACE, like the Sierra Club, who's been very active. And I think they have a member even that's engaged with the PSAT committee that's working and reviewing this RP. But it's a conglomerate. It's a coalition of grassroots and grass tops groups that are working, not because they're trying to make money, but because they're trying to make a better deal, a better place, and a better life for Memphians who have to pay at the end of the day for the power that we get from the wholesale supplier. If we can get more for less, or if we can get the same amount for less, that's a raise for every ratepayer in this community by the money that they get to keep in their pocket because they don't have to ship it off to Knoxville or Chattanooga or East Tennessee. It can be spent here in our local economy, helping to raise the standard of living for all of us who live here in this wonderful city of good abode, Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay, thank you so much again. You all did a great job. And now I have some information to share with you all who have tuned in about how you can stay connected. And the questions are still coming in. Oh my goodness. So on Zoom, if you're on Zoom, of course, you were submitting questions in the box on the screen, and we're going to keep those questions and decide what we're going to do with them, how we can share them, because we do have, we have a Facebook page, Memphis Has the Power, so maybe we can share them there and address them there. But you can go to memphishasthepower.org/FAQ. It's an excellent section with frequently asked questions that will expound on some of the things that have been discussed here this evening, especially some other items. And we would like for you to stay connected with us and get involved. We have a petition. The petition is at memphishavethepower.org. And what the petition does is let our leaders know that we want clean, affordable, and renewable options as they move forward with decisions regarding our energy future. And so at this time, I'll close it out. Once again, this has been Pearl Walker with Memphis Has the Power. Thank you to our panelists, our guests, and the SACE team who put this together. Have a good evening.